Imagine for a moment that you wake up tomorrow morning, step outside, and the world feels completely wrong. The air is thick, roaring like a jet engine. The ground trembles beneath your feet, and somewhere in the distance, you hear the sound of waves slamming into the land with impossible force. The Earth, the planet that has quietly spun beneath us for billions of years, has suddenly stopped rotating. Not slowed gradually, not eased into a crawl, but stopped in an instant. Right now, as you sit and listen, you're moving faster than you realize. At the equator, Earth's surface spins at over 1,000 miles per hour. You don't feel it because everything around you, the air, the oceans, even your own body, is moving at that same speed. But if Earth's rotation suddenly froze, everything not nailed down to solid bedrock would keep moving. Skyscrapers would snap in half as their tops tried to keep going while their foundations stayed put. Cars, trains, and planes would tear free of the ground, rolling and tumbling eastward at deadly speeds. Entire cities would be ripped apart in the blink of an eye. And then comes the water. The oceans, which cover most of our planet, are shaped by Earth's spin. Right now, centrifugal force makes them bulge outward at the equator, giving Earth its slightly squashed shape. Take away the spin, and that bulge collapses. Water would begin to drain away from the equator and rush toward the poles. Imagine coastlines from Canada to Siberia vanishing beneath rising seas, while the tropics are left behind as vast, empty plains. The Amazon rainforest would wither into desert, while northern Europe would drown under walls of water hundreds of feet high. Earth's geography would be rewritten almost overnight. But the most immediate terror would be in the skies. The atmosphere, like the oceans, is moving with Earth's rotation. Stop the ground, and the air keeps going. Winds faster than the speed of sound would race across the surface, shredding forests, tearing mountains into dust, and blasting anything unlucky enough to remain exposed. Hurricanes would feel like gentle breezes compared to these unstoppable gales. The very air would turn against us, sweeping away whatever the initial destruction had spared. And even if humanity somehow endured those first violent hours, a new nightmare would begin. Our familiar cycle of day and night would vanish. With no rotation, Earth would no longer spin toward or away from the sun. One half of the planet would be locked in eternal daylight, bathed in scorching heat, while the other half would be trapped in endless darkness, sinking into unimaginable cold. On the sunlit side, deserts would reach temperatures high enough to boil lakes and oceans, filling the sky with choking steam. Forests would burst into flames, crops would shrivel in the soil, and even concrete would blister under the relentless heat. On the dark side, the opposite fate would unfold. Temperatures would plunge far below freezing. The oceans would freeze solid, snow would pile endlessly, and the land would become a frozen wasteland of silence and shadow. Between these two extremes lies a thin strip of twilight, a narrow band where the sun forever hangs on the horizon. In this strange in-between land, temperatures might be survivable, neither burning hot nor freezing cold. Perhaps here, humanity could cling to life. But this twilight strip would be under constant assault from powerful winds, as hot air rushed in from the bright side and freezing air poured in from the dark. Survival would be possible only with enormous effort. And there's another hidden danger: the collapse of Earth's magnetic shield. Right now, deep beneath your feet, molten iron is spinning in Earth's core, generating the magnetic field that shields us from the sun's deadly radiation. That protective bubble exists thanks, in part, to our rotation. If Earth stopped, the dynamo effect could shut down, leaving us vulnerable. Without that shield, solar winds would strip away our atmosphere and bombard the surface with radiation strong enough to cause mass extinctions. Over time, Earth would begin to resemble Mars, barren, dry, and lifeless. At this point, the Earth we know is gone. The oceans have moved, the air has turned violent, and the balance of day and night has shattered. But this is only the beginning of what a non-spinning Earth would truly look like. If somehow humanity survived the first waves of destruction, the flying debris, the raging winds, and the oceans crashing into new coastlines, we would be left facing a planet that no longer resembled home. The first thing we would notice is the silence after the chaos, and then the new, brutal rhythm of life on a non-spinning world. On the daylight side, survival would be nearly impossible. The sun, fixed in the sky, would blaze down relentlessly, baking the land for weeks, months, years, without ever setting. Crops would fail almost immediately, not just from heat, but from the total lack of a natural day-night cycle. Soil would dry out, lakes would evaporate, and entire ecosystems would collapse in a matter of weeks. Even the oceans that survived the initial upheaval would begin to boil away into the sky, filling the atmosphere with thick clouds and choking steam. Temperatures could climb to hundreds of degrees, hot enough to melt asphalt, warp steel, and make much of the land utterly uninhabitable. On the dark side, the opposite reality would unfold. Without sunlight, temperatures would plunge to extremes far below anything seen on Earth today. The oceans here would harden into slabs of ice, mile after mile of frozen water stretching into the darkness. Snow would fall endlessly, piling higher and higher until the land was buried beneath an unbroken white desert. The air itself would grow thin as it condensed and froze, leaving behind a silent, suffocating world. Between the fire and the ice, however, lies that narrow twilight zone, a strange borderland where the sun eternally hangs low on the horizon. Here, conditions might be marginally survivable. The sky would glow with a permanent orange hue, casting long shadows that never move. Temperatures would remain extreme but not instantly deadly, hovering somewhere between scorching heat and freezing cold. In theory, humanity could carve out a life here. Cities could be built along this permanent sunset, clinging to the delicate balance where day meets night. But life in this strip would never be peaceful. The winds from both hemispheres would constantly collide here, creating storms stronger than anything in our history. Hot air from the sunlit side would surge into the twilight band, slamming into the freezing winds rushing in from the dark side. The result would be never-ending tempests, violent enough to tear apart anything we tried to build. Surviving here would require technology far beyond what we rely on today. Massive domes, underground bunkers, artificial ecosystems, and constant protection from the fury of the atmosphere. And the problems wouldn't stop there. Without Earth's rotation, the protective magnetic field could vanish. Radiation from the sun would pour down on the daylight side and seep into the twilight zone. Over decades and centuries, this radiation would erode what remained of our atmosphere, leaving the air thinner and less breathable. People would need radiation shielding, perhaps living underground or beneath the seas to survive. The planet would be hostile in ways both immediate and invisible. Over the course of thousands or even millions of years, Earth would continue to change. The redistribution of the oceans would stabilize into a strange new pattern. Giant seas at the poles and a massive supercontinent stretched along the equator. This land, dry and barren, would crack beneath relentless heat and cold. Earth's climate as we know it, shifting seasons, circulating winds, predictable weather, would disappear entirely. Life would have to evolve all over again. Extremophiles, the tiny microbes that thrive in volcanic vents or beneath Antarctic ice, might find new opportunities. Creatures adapted to constant darkness might flourish on the frozen side, while heat-loving species could cling to the blazing daylight zones. The balance of life would be completely rewritten. For humanity, survival would depend entirely on adaptation. Underground cities shielded from the winds and radiation might sustain us. Artificial sunlight could allow crops to grow. Advanced energy systems could regulate heat and cold. But our species would no longer live freely on the surface of Earth. Instead, we'd become tenants on a hostile planet, forced to use technology just to cling to existence. The dream of open skies, warm beaches, and fertile plains would be nothing but a memory. This nightmare scenario makes for a fascinating thought experiment, but could it ever actually happen? The short answer is no. Earth cannot suddenly stop spinning. There is no natural force strong enough to bring the planet to a dead halt in an instant. The only realistic way Earth could stop is if something unimaginably massive, like a collision with another planet, struck us head-on. And if that happened, the destruction would make everything we've imagined here look trivial. In reality, Earth is slowing down, but so gradually that you'll never notice it. Tidal forces from the moon are acting like cosmic brakes, stealing tiny amounts of Earth's spin energy and lengthening our days by about 1.7 milliseconds every century. At this pace, billions of years from now, Earth might eventually stop spinning relative to the moon, always showing the same face to it, just as the moon always shows the same face to us. But long before that happens, the sun will expand into a red giant, swallowing Earth entirely. In other words, our planet will never live to see a true stop. So what do we take away from this? If Earth stopped spinning, the world as we know it would end. We would be thrown across the surface. The oceans would flood the poles, the winds would become unstoppable, and the balance of day and night would shatter. Radiation would strip away our protection, and the biosphere would collapse. Only a sliver of land between light and darkness might remain survivable, and even then only with incredible effort. It's terrifying to think about, but it also highlights just how delicate and precious Earth's balance really is. The gentle spin of our planet, the tilt of its axis, the shield of its magnetic field. All of these invisible forces combine to make life possible. Without them, Earth would be just another barren rock in space. So the next time you watch a sunset or feel the breeze on your face, remember, it's only possible because our planet keeps spinning quietly, reliably every single day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into one of the strangest what-if scenarios in science, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what other impossible questions you'd like me to explore. Until next time, stay curious and never stop wondering.